Greetings, fellow gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru.
And I'm a banshee from a swamp.
She is a banshee from a swamp, also known as Lizzy Lemondrop, who is back again for another Blood Splattered vlog. And today we are going to talk about The Lodge, the latest film by the Austrian filmmakers behind Goodnight Mommy, which was an extremely, extremely rough watch. And I don't mean in the bad sense, I mean in the, oh god, is that movie intense. And this movie is equally fucking intense. So, without getting into spoilers, what did you think of The Lodge?
It's a lot. It was a very heavy movie.
Yeah.
You know this about me. My personal standard for horror is if there's a certain amount of unrelenting, miserable weight to it, it's a lot harder for me to watch.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Given the choice, I prefer House of a Thousand Corpses to Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, because Devil's Rejects is way more the unrelenting, miserableness, whereas the House of a Thousand Corpses is way more, fun, wacky craziness, while still having some of that heaviness. Yeah. But it's more balanced out in that, so I get that.
That's my spectrum on horror, so this was a harder sit for me. I'm not unhappy I watched it.
Oh, yeah.
It was a great movie, and I especially liked the environment we saw it in. We saw it at the Alamo Drafthouse, which was fun.
Oh, yeah.
And it was great, and it was a very good movie. I just don't think I'm ever going to be able to watch it a second time.
Yeah, San Francisco a little while back got an Alamo Drafthouse, and I never actually went out to that theater because I had other theaters that were closer to me that I would go to more often, and plus I have these deals, those
the AMC Stubs.
The AMC Stubs Awards thing, which allows us to see movies free. So there was really very rarely a reason to go to the Alamo Drafthouse, though I'm definitely going to go more often now having gone this time. And they were the only theater showing The Lodge, and I really wanted to see that movie. I wanted to see that movie way more than The Boy 2 that was coming out this weekend. So we're like, let's just go to the Alamo Drafthouse. Fuck it. And we did. It was an amazing experience in the theater, but more than that, oh my god, this movie. I love this movie, but I understand if this is one of those movies that you only watch once, because once you've gone through it, it's hard to go through it again.
It was a journey, and it was a journey I'm happy I went on. I was in the right headspace for it. I just, I don't think I could sit through it a second time.
For those of you who've seen Goodnight Mommy, imagine if the filmmakers behind that combined that movie with elements from Hereditary and The Shining. And that's kind of what this movie is. And even me saying that doesn't quite accurately describe the movie.
No, because I only know the bare bones of Hereditary because it seemed like that really heavy, unrelenting kind of horror movie.
Oh yeah, and it is.
I was just kind of I'm gonna skip that one. But the plot of the movie is very different from...
It's a very different plot. It's closer to Goodnight Mommy in the plot, but still different from that. Ironically, the movie that its plot is most like is kind of a spoiler, so we'll get to that. But it's a much better movie of a terrible movie that I've seen recently. Let me just say that.
Just cribbing my point.
Yeah. You were the one who pointed that out, and once you pointed that out, I couldn't unsee it.
So we'll do that. We'll talk about that in spoilers.
We'll talk about that in spoilers, but for people who've been paying attention, they'll probably get what I'm talking about. But mind you, that was her point. That I didn't realize that until she pointed it out. Some warnings I will give to you if you're going to go see this movie.
Dead puppy.
Yeah, there's some puppy death in this movie, and it's not like a quick puppy death. There's some long drawn out
shots of the dead puppy.
Yeah, so be forewarned about that. If you're the kind of person who has trouble watching a movie with excessive gaslighting,
yeah, well, it's a movie. I would say the big trigger warnings.
Yeah, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Suicide, animal death, and gaslighting.
Now, that all being said, if you love movies like Hereditary, because I fucking love movies like Hereditary, and Goodnight Mommy, their other movie, watch the shit out of this movie, because this movie is on par with any of those movies, and is just as fucking unrelenting and shocking. Like, and I do want to point out that we mentioned that, like, there's animal death in this movie, but I want to point out that much like Goodnight Mommy, it's also metaphorical. Like, it's literally happening, but it's more, it's not just shock value animal death. It's animal death that's happening for a purpose.
It serves a purpose of the plot. Like I said, I don't particularly love animal death in movies, but like I wouldn't take it out.
Yep.
Like it was an important plot element, and it makes it establishes a stake and a point.
That is another thing I will say about this movie. It is so perfect, I wouldn't change a goddamn thing.
It's a perfectly constructed movie, and I feel like the filmmakers made exactly the movie they wanted. They set out to make.
It's one of those movies you watch where you can tell that the filmmakers were incredibly deliberate with every single frame. Like no shot is lasting longer than it absolutely needs to for maximum effect.
Every cut is perfect.
Yeah.
Like you can tell, like so much care went into the editing of the movie just to make sure that every point, and also you could tell that they already knew how they were going to edit the shots by the way they directed the actors.
Like you can definitely tell there was a lot of like preparation for the movie because they knew exactly what they were going to do. That all being said, if you're the kind of person who doesn't like slow burn movies, while there is some shocking stuff that happens right off the bat in this movie, this movie does take a while to really get into exactly what's going on, but the dread is there the entire time.
It is. You are never not unsettled by what's happening. But
if you're not picking up on all the uncomfortable subtleties, I can see how some might call it slow. I didn't think it was, but it definitely is, like, not a fast-paced movie. I'll say that. It's not fast-paced, but I never found it slow. No. I found it very deliberately paced. Like, I will definitely say this, too. Of all the horror movies I've seen so far this year, this is definitely one of the first contenders for like the number one slot. This is the best. I would call it the best horror movie we've seen this year, and we've seen pretty much every horror movie that's come out this year except The Boy 2. You know, so far this is like right off the bat. This feels like this year's Hereditary. This feels like this year's The Witch. This feels like that movie that stands out, is incredibly art house while also being an incredibly shocking and dread-filled horror movie. It's not a movie that's like filled with jump scares that's here for you to eat popcorn and have fun. No. There is a couple moments where you'll jump, but weirdly enough, I wouldn't call them jump scares. It's also not a gore-heavy movie. No, but when it is gory, or at least bloody, it hits you. It hits you hard. Like, I would, despite the fact that this is kind of a frustrating label because it's one that's often used to dismiss the elevated horror label. Yeah, elevated horror. Like a psychological thriller. Yeah. Oh, psychological. Actually, this would definitely qualify as a psychological horror movie or thriller movie or whatever you want to call it, because it definitely is super psychological. It's a cabin fever movie. Functionally. And if you're wondering why we haven't really, like, talked about any of, like, the themes and stuff like that, I'll say this. If you've seen Goodnight Mommy, there's some carryover themes from that movie that are carrying into this movie, but done a little differently. But saying more than that, I feel like we're going to spoil huge chunks of the movie, because a huge chunk of the experience for me, and probably for you too. We didn't see a single trailer for this. We had no idea what it was about. All we knew was that everyone was saying the movie was great on Twitter and on horror YouTube, so we were like, okay, let's go see it. So I went into this movie blind, she went into this movie blind, and half of the dread and the horror is watching the movie and not knowing what's going to happen, and not knowing. No idea what it's about, no idea what's coming. And I feel like if I start addressing the themes here in the non-spoiler section, I'm going to flat out spoil the experience. But at least you'll get a taste of some of them in some of our warnings that we gave you earlier. Yeah. You have maybe an idea about how, like, And some of the movies that I've been comparing it to, because if I'm comparing it to Hereditary, then obviously there's going to be some sort of family unit dysfunction happening here. I compared it to Goodnight Mommy, so obviously there's going to be some thing involving kids. Much like both of those movies, there's a weird religious angle to that. But beyond that, I can't I can't without spoiling. Like
this movie does not have a high quality opinion of religion.
No. To be fair, none of the movies described do. So yeah, highly recommend The Lodge. For those of you with the weaker constitutions or just can't handle movies with these extreme type of themes, then I would recommend for you guys, not that you shouldn't watch it, but you might want to wait until you can watch it in an environment where you can pause, if need be, and give yourself a breather.
Get up, walk around. I needed that when I finally saw Midsommar.
Oh, yeah.
I was very happy that
That's another movie that, like, this totally falls in the wheelhouse of.
Yes, but now Midsommar is a movie I will watch a bunch of times because I was really able to personally connect to that.
Compared to all the other movies we just listed, with maybe the exception being The Witch, Midsommar kind of has a happier ending.
Yeah.
Happy-ish.
Depending
Hopeful.
Depending on your perspective.
Well, that's the same thing with The Witch. Like, the ending of The Witch is hopeful, like, depending upon your perspective.
Depends on your perspective. Do you interpret this as a happy ending for the? It's like how, like when we came out of the Pet Cemetery remake, I said the same thing. It's like it's a happy ending. They're all
from
together.
a certain point of view. It's happy. So yeah, like don't take my my heavy disposition right now as like an indication that the movie is bad in any way. I love this movie. It's perfect. It's a movie that has been weighing on me since I watched it because it was that intense.
It's a very good, like, I need my emotional support stuffed animal to talk about it.
Like, some movies are there just to scare you with some jump scares and some thrills. Other movies are there to kill your soul with dread and just horrific, not imagery, but, like, horrific, nihilistic messages. I don't know what else to say.
It's a very good, very intense movie. Don't go into it if you're in a not great emotional state.
Oh, yeah. Which I will say, it did help and made it easier to digest the craziness or the intensity of this movie that we saw it at the Alamo Drafthouse, which has such a wonderful, fun atmosphere, and we're just sitting there eating our burgers and stuff. Though I will say this, one downside to the Alamo Drafthouse is that you quickly realize why most theaters just serve popcorn and candy, because most other foods, like fried foods, are really crunchy. So, like, we're sitting there watching The Lodge.
That's the problem with The Lodge, because The Lodge is such a quiet, meditative movie.
It's so quiet and meditative.
Crunch.
You're like I'm like sitting there, like you handed me the fried pickle, and I was eating the fried pickle, and I was like, oh shit, I can't eat this without like completely ruining the mood of the scene. So, all right, wait for a moment of excitement. All right, there's a little bit crunch. So, needless to say, I highly recommend The Lodge. I'm assuming...
Yes, definitely. Like I said, I probably won't, just because of my own emotional takes,
exactly.
I don't think I'm going to be able to sit through it a second time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's definitely worth seeing. 100%.
Absolutely.
I thought it was great.
And with that said, let us move on to the spoilers so we can stop vaguing shit. All right, so... where to begin? First off, one thing I'll say about this movie that I fucking loved about it was that this movie pulls a Hitchcock. It pulls a Wes Craven, much like Psycho and Scream. It introduces you right away to the biggest star in the movie, only to watch them die in the most shocking and horrific fashion right off the bat.
You're not prepared. I was looking, here's the thing, because I just assumed, okay, this is enough, this is... nothing important is going to happen in the next 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So I looked away and I heard...
I had that moment too, because they had just delivered my brisket burger, and I was just like, ooh, I'm going to take a bite. And then once I was taking the bite, that's when I heard the bang, and I looked back up, and I'm like, oh shit, that just happened.
Alicia Silverstone just shot herself in the head.
Oh my god.
Fuck.
That shit, the funny thing is, once that happened, I felt my heart sink.
I know.
And then, like, for the rest of the movie, my heart was, like, trying to climb back up, but the movie kept beating it back down.
It was, here's the thing, it was such an intense... It was so unexpected.
Oh my god,
like,
that
it
shit.
Was such, and it's not, the shock doesn't just come from being unexpected, like, it's effective.
Now, you haven't seen Hereditary, so I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it hit me in the same way that one scene in Hereditary did. You all out there that's seen it know exactly what I'm talking about. It was not quite there, but almost on par with that in terms of just like the holy shit that just happened. I did not expect that. And it was extra shocking because it was Alicia Silverstone. I'm like, oh shit, like she's in this movie. She's the biggest star. Okay, let's see what happens. And at first I thought, like, because I hadn't seen any of the trailers and stuff, that the movie was going to be about like her slowly losing her mind while her husband and kids like do something else.
That's what it felt like.
But then she shot herself and I'm like, oh no, this is a different story entirely. Okay, let's see where this is going. And then we get to like the little girl crying about her mom because it turns out the mom was super religious. So the kids were raised religious. So like the little girl is weeping because she knows her mom can't go to heaven based on the doctrine that they ascribe to. And I'm just sitting there going like, I'm a fucking atheist, so that's all bullshit to me, but it broke my heart to watch that girl cry.
Imagine being like 8 years old.
And that's all you know.
And you're convinced that your mother went to hell.
I'm like sitting there and she's like crying and like I'm feeling the tears watching the movie.
The dad's trying to make it better and there's like no, there is no making it better. She thinks her mom is in hell.
And mind you, this is the first 10 minutes of the movie and I'm already fucking weeping in my chair. Like, Jesus Christ. And the movie just keeps going from there. And that's when we start to realize what this movie's actually about. It's basically about this family that's going on this vacation to this cabin in the middle of winter, post the mom killing herself and the dad bringing his new girlfriend along,
fiance,
and then leaving the kids with the girlfriend and watching the aftermath of what happens as a result of that.
Look, here's an important detail because it introduces the idea the kids have a lot of animosity towards new girlfriend because they blame her for being the reason their mom killed herself.
Yep, and they're really paranoid about her because apparently the dad is an author and he writes about cults. And he wrote a book about one cult that the girl he started dating was a survivor of.
The cult pulled to Jonestown.
Yeah, and she was the lone survivor, and based on what they implied, the person who, like, pulled the trigger, so to speak, on all the...
What we understand it is that the reason she's not dead is because her job was to spread the message of the cults.
Yeah, and so right away we have a girl who is a survivor of a cult. So she has psychological trauma as a result of that. And it's very clear that she's taking medication throughout the entire movie about that. You have these kids that are surviving the trauma of their mom having fucking killed herself. And we have this dad that just abandons them in the middle of the fucking cabin together to go deal with work stuff, not addressing the fucking trauma of any of the people in his life.
Who's straight up just like, it's been 6 months since your mother shot yourself. Fine. It's fine. You're ready to start the new family, right?
This is what I meant when I said that this is like there's some carryover themes from Goodnight Mommy, because that movie also dealt with a parent who was not addressing the grief of their children very well, and the destruction of their relationships as a result of that. And this movie has that element as well, but in a completely different angle.
Well, I want to talk about one of my favorite things the movie
does. Go for it.
Which is, here's the thing, the whole first act of the movie, you don't see the face of who is ostensibly our main character. Yeah, because
at the beginning, we start off like from the mom's perspective, but then when she kills herself, it becomes the kid's perspective.
We're largely following the kids for the first act of the movie. And the perspective of the children is that Grace is this sort of crazy
evil cult person. Yeah.
And so there's a whole
corrupter of their dad.
Yeah. So there's these whole shot, like up until the first time we see her face, she's always from behind, or she's out of focus. That's the word I'm looking for. Or she's out of focus while the kids are in focus. And something great that the movie does is about partway through the movie, not quite halfway, partway through the movie, our character perspectives shift.
Yeah, it becomes more her perspective. Entering this family with this family unit in which she's the stranger.
Yeah.
And like entering this cabin that has all this history between the kids and the mom and the dad, but she has no connection to, so she's like the invader. And oh man, and that shit's rough because you're like, at that point, you're no longer feeling as much as the kids' grief because you are feeling that, but now you're starting to feel her discomfort of being in this environment.
You really start to feel for her. And the movie does a great job of communicating visually
Oh God,
the shifts in perspective. It's rare for me to see a movie so effectively make me shift my empathy from character to character this way. Because, like, there's this great visual scene. There's a scene where I really think is a signifying scene where we're switching perspective, where... So the behavior from the kids towards Grace has been kind of shitty, but up until that, you're, like, really understanding. It's like...
Well, there's also this feeling that, like, this entire trip was a really bad idea on the adults' part. Yeah. So you're kind of on the kid's side at first.
There's a bit where Grace is in the shower, and then she gets out of the shower, and we realize the teenage son was watching her in the shower.
And this is, like, the moment where you feel the kids are starting to cross a line.
Yeah.
And it just gets worse from there. Like, you actually, and on top of this, you have these kids, these people that are dealing with this trauma, and so they are all dealing with their own versions of PTSD.
Yes.
So what you end up is a scenario, like, you compared it to, which movie?
The Turning.
The Turning.
The terrible adaptation of The Turning of the Screw we saw last month.
Which is an adaptation of The Turning of the Screw, but you were right in that it's a very similar setup in which you have this person who's entering this home post a grieving thing.
Yeah.
Post some sort of great tragedy that's causing the people in the home to grieve. And then thinks they're seeing ghosts or losing their mind, but it's not clear whether it's because the people in the house are fucking with her or if she's just going crazy.
If she's going crazy, if she's being fucked with, if there's actually supernatural
or if there's actually
shit
supernatural.
Happening. And here's the thing, this movie succeeds in this feat so much more successfully.
Oh yeah, it's a way better version of that story. It's a way better version
of this story. Also, but it was really hard for me not to be comparing it in my head, partly because we had just seen it relatively recently, and also because we had Billy from Stranger Things instead of Richie playing the teenage kid.
So you had the two Stranger Kids thing. Yeah, yep.
Or not from Stranger Things, I'm sorry, from It.
Oh, you're right.
Not.
Yeah, this kid wasn't in Stranger Things. He was in It, but it's the two kids from It. Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
But that's interesting. Actually, is that the three big horror movies we've seen this year all starred kids from It. We had the little girl in.
Oh shit! You're right.
In Gretel and Hansel.
Yeah. All three of them.
Those kids are doing okay.
Yeah, I think they're doing fine with their careers. Even though The Turning was hot garbage.
No, but Finn Wolfhard has other shit.
Yeah.
Finn Wolfhard is fine.
He's gonna make up for it with Ghostbusters.
He can have some hot garbage. He's fine.
He's got a new season of Stranger Things. He's got Ghostbusters coming up, and those look way better.
He's gonna be fine. He's gonna be fine.
But this movie you're right. It's a way better version of that setup.
Well, because you also did a way better job at actually making me unsure at points whether what was happening was real or not.
And because it wasn't actually an adaptation of Turn of the Screw, but playing with some of the similar ideas, it meant this movie was able to go in some unique directions that I haven't seen before.
Like I said, it was fun. It's like it's a takeoff of a cabin fever movie. Like it's a bunch of people trapped alone in the middle of nowhere. And
paranoia increasing. The fact that there's a point in the movie in which they're sitting down watching TV before like the power goes out and stuff, and they're watching The Thing, kind of tells you a little bit of some of the themes of paranoia that's going to be seeping through this movie.
But also, great call, grown up in the room, for showing The Thing.
What the funny thing
to
is,
the traumatized 7-year-old that you're babysitting.
But what's hilarious is the kids were loving the movie. It was the adult who was having PTSD from it.
No, I know, but I was still sitting there being like, this is not maybe the best choice
but
movie.
I kind of like it because as like an old ass fucking horror fan, I like watching all those movies in the 80s and the 90s where people would be watching like
it is. It's the scream scene where Jamie Kennedy is shouting at Jamie Lee Curtis.
Seeing someone do it to John Carpenter's The Thing when John Carpenter often did that with the original The Thing from Another World. He'd put that there and people would be watching it. Same thing with Night of the Living Dead. So it just felt like a little... it was thematically relevant, and because, much like The Thing, you're not quite sure who the culprit is by the end. Well, you are by the end, but, like, leading up to the end, you're not quite sure.
There's huge... Like, you don't know until the movie tells you what's going on. It is impossible to know for sure.
Hesitant whether or not I'm going to, in the spoiler section, tell you what outright is going on. But I will tell you that, like, one way or another, people are getting gaslit. Like,
yes, it's a movie about trauma and emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm. Hardcore, as well as adults not recognizing the
It is.
The grieving of the children.
And children not understanding the scope of trauma in adults.
Yes.
Because more than anything else... Okay, we won't...
Should we go into it?
It's the spoiler section.
All right, well, let me give you a double spoiler warning right here. If you do not want to know the absolute end result of this movie, then stop right here and go see the movie for yourself. Because there's no turning back once we tell you about this. So, you warned? All right. All right. So...
The kids are a bunch of gaslighty fucks.
Yeah, basically what we find out, because there's this whole motif in the movie that we keep cutting back to this dollhouse, which was really reminded me of Hereditary, because Hereditary did that a lot.
Yeah.
But for different reasons in that movie than in this movie. But in this movie, we're not quite sure why we're cutting back to the dollhouse. But all the dolls in the dollhouse look like are in these weird scenarios that are kind of horrific, like they're like dying on the couch. I know,
you've got like children dead on the couch.
There's a person hanging.
A person hung from the staircase.
And then we find out by the end of the movie that the dollhouse we keep cutting to, that the kids were playing with at the beginning of the movie, this is their plan. They have decided that they do not like their stepmom, and they partially blame their stepmom for their mom killing themselves.
Future stepmom. They're not married.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
Dad's girlfriend.
Dad's fiance.
Easier to say stepmom, but yeah.
But yeah. I just don't want confusion.
But so they've decided this elaborate scenario using her trauma from all the research they were able to do through because their dad wrote a book on their cult, and to basically drive her insane, so that her and the dad's relationship will fall apart. What this actually leads to is a bloody fucking massacre.
Well, here's the thing. All right, I understand that they're children.
Yeah.
But I'm trying, we think that this person is a psycho.
Oh, yeah.
Our dad left our mom for a psychopath. Here's what we should do. Steal her medication and purposefully trigger a psychotic break in her. That won't end poorly for anybody.
Now the thing is, I'll say, now that I've spoiled that, some of you that have seen Goodnight Mommy are sitting there going like, I knew it. And I'm like, yes. Because there are some carryover themes from that movie in this one. So there you go. Basically throughout the movie, the kids have created this elaborate scenario to drive her crazy. But at this point in the movie, we're basically following her perspective, so we don't know if they're fucking with her or if she's just being paranoid.
Yeah. Well, we're at this... Here's the thing. So much of the kids' behavior towards her made, I was like, no, you're being shitty, but, you're kids and you don't want to be here.
The not wanting to talk to her.
And they're traumatized, and it's like, okay, this makes sense.
Being upset that she's wearing the mom's hat and things like that.
It's not unreasonable shit for kids to be upset by.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But...
Because, again... in the first third of this movie, you're kind of on their side.
It is, like I said, there's that great scene in the the bathroom scene is when you really know that there's some shit, okay, so some shit's not right. This is not just kids being pissy, these kids are purposefully messing with her.
And that's also, the catalyst that kind of begins, the real horror in the movie, because, we had some, weird hints up until that point of, weird things, but, she's, taking her pills, so her brain's calming down and all that stuff. But then... After that, she confronts the teenage son and about watching her in the shower, and he decides to basically parlay and he makes her some tea and stuff, which we find out later was dosed with sleeping pills.
Oh, I knew it! I saw him handing her, it was tea or hot chocolate or something, but I saw him handing it to him he drunk
and so they're sitting there watching the TV, and the little girl pretends to be cold. Which we don't realize she's pretending until later, so that he can bring in the
space heater,
the gas heater, because he's concocting this elaborate scenario to make her believe that they all die from the space heater and the gas, while they were sleeping. And so, a huge chunk of this movie is the kid pretending to figure out that they're dead. And, proving it by, hanging himself and, doing all that stuff.
They're purposely... And then this is not just a prank.
Yeah, this is more than a prank.
They are trying to traumatize her using the things that they know she is
They're drugging her.
They're drugging her. They stole her antipsychotics. We don't really know what they are, but the pills she obviously takes to help with her trauma. With her PTSD.
At night, they are playing on the loudspeaker the voice of
her dead father, who was the cult leader.
And so she's hallucinating all this shit, actually hallucinating shit on top of being fucked with because she does have antipsychotics.
That they took from her.
And I love that by the end of this movie, you don't know what's real and what's not until you reach the big emotional climax of that, which is her finding her dog dead because the kids let it outside and it died in the snow. Now, the little girl says that she accidentally left the door open. I don't know if it was an accident, but she seemed like she was upset.
The little girl was obviously actually upset that the dog had died.
But it's hard for me to tell if that upset was she didn't realize the ramifications of what she was doing, because she also obviously didn't realize that the girl...
Okay, what's very apparent to me is that the little sister was going along with the brother's plan.
Yes.
She had no idea the ramifications.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of whether the little girl was the ringleader or not, the little boy is the older brother.
Yeah.
He should not be fucking doing this.
It was just very apparent to me that it was the brother's plan.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because how could it have been her plan?
Yeah.
Based on a lot of the stuff they do. That would have required his more knowledgeable age and experience.
So... They're purposely screaming her trauma triggers at her. They're doing it intentionally. This is why
and creating like elaborate photoshops that they put together of like their obituaries.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there is a point in the movie where there's a part of you that believes, oh, maybe they are in purgatory. Like for a minute, they've convinced you, the audience.
You could believe it.
Yeah.
When he first says it to her, you actually start to think.
They fuck with the clocks, so the clocks keep saying 9 days later.
Yeah. It's...
Oh man, the thing is that like we're not. It's hard to do this movie justice for the simple reason that just telling you what happens doesn't express the experience of watching this unfold and trying to piece it together. And she's trying to figure it out too, but you as the audience are going to figure it out before she does, for the simple reason that by the end of this movie, she's completely lost her mind. She's off her meds.
Here's the thing: they achieved what they wanted to achieve. They drove her insane. And it cost them the rest of their family. Yeah. It
from that point on, it becomes low key The Shining, but not like Jack Nicholson over the top performance. I love Jack Nicholson, but this is much more low key movie.
This is also because here's part of what the kids do is they convince her we're dead, so we can't die.
Yeah. And so the moment when she takes out the dad's gun and starts going into this weirdly catatonic state and like quoting scripture and stuff, you start to worry that she's
it's also after this massive like crucifixion scene on herself where she's like she's kneeling into burning embers.
That scene was like, that was another one of those scenes where I like had to look away because it was so rough.
It's not even that it was super graphic.
No.
It was just so intense, and you could feel...
And her scream.
Yeah.
It was so, like, her scream made my fucking spine tingle. It was like, ugh. And that's not even going into the fucking emotional devastation that you feel, even though you're pretty sure the dog is dead by this point, before she even finds the corpse. But the entire walking back of the corpse from the yard to the front porch, and then her going into this catatonic fugue state on the porch, holding the dog, rocking with the dog.
Well, because
you feel that.
The important symbolism of that, because that's truly the moment that breaks her.
Because
the dog symbolized her new life after she finally got out of the cult. To her, the dog symbolized restarting and getting away from her trauma and getting away from her fucked up life in childhood. And the dog dying, I think, to her,
that was the last straw.
It was the sign from God that she was in purgatory and she was being punished. How dare you leave me? How dare you abandon the teachings of the cult, of the religious cults? How dare, It's the final step over the edge, right there. And you feel that as an audience member, because I even looked over to you and, like, I saw you were about to cry. I felt like I was about to cry. Like, it was... That shit, like, was rough. It was, like, so upsetting. And here's the thing. Listening to the little girl scream and cry in the climax of the movie was also one of the hardest, like...
And it hits you a little differently than it did at the beginning of the movie. At the beginning of the movie, it's like pure empathy. But at the end of the movie, you're feeling empathy, but you're also feeling anger because you're also just like...
You did this!
Why did you do this? How dare you?
You did this to this person.
And I can't believe I'm reaching the end of the movie and I'm like all of a sudden partially on her side. But she's lost her mind. It's like...
Well, there's this scene when the dad finally comes back.
Oh God, that scene.
And she is trying to explaining to him, it's like, we're dead. We can't, we're in purgatory. We need to repent our sins.
And he's just trying to get her to hand over the gun.
He's trying to do it because he's like trying to grab her hands. He's trying to be so kind. He's trying to love her.
Yep.
And it's so tragic.
Yeah. That's another scene that hit really fucking hard. Like the third time in the movie where my heart fucking sank.
God.
Oh man, if you have not gotten the picture so far, like this is a phenomenal movie, but good God, is it a rough set? It is.
It's a hard one.
Oh man, do you have any more things you want to say, or should we wrap this up?
This is a very great movie, and people should see it. Just like I said, be conscious of the trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a frustrating phrase.
I'm not a person who often puts trigger warnings. I've occasionally warned about dead animals and stuff because I have a couple friends that will really affect them. But this movie is one of those movies where I definitely feel the need to warn people because I'm sitting there feeling the effects of what's going on.
I can absolutely see how if you've been a victim of gaslighting.
Oh yeah. Which is why I insist if you do want to watch it on a screen that you can pause.
Because it's literally that. It's people intentionally lying to someone in an attempt to make them question their sanity and their perception of reality.
While also doing a perfect job of putting you in the mental state of the person who's losing their mind.
It does. It makes you... Because the person you're empathizing with at this point in the movie is the person being gaslit.
Oh, absolutely. No, you were right earlier when you're like, this is like a psychological thriller. Like, I tend to call things psychological horror, which is technically a related genre. But it's definitely psychological hardcore, right?
Yeah.
And so, with that said, where can they follow you on social media?
I'm on Twitter as Lizzy Lemon Drop.
Alrighty then. Y'all know me. I'm the Horror Guru. You can find me at the Horror Guru on Twitter, on Twitch, on Facebook. Just look up the Horror Guru and Blood Splattered Cinema, and I'll be there. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this video, and be sure to ring that notification bell so that you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you'd like to help my channel more directly, then be sure to check out my Patreon page. And remember, if you decide to go the Patreon route, even $1 a day, or $1 a month, not $1 a day, even $1 a month can go a long way.
$1 a day keeps the ghouls away.
$1 a day keeps the ghouls away. $1 a day keeps the tax collector away. And so, with that said, we're going to go try to watch a happier movie or something to improve our moods. And we'll catch y'all later.
Grab your emotional support bunnies.
Pull up a chair.